welcome back to the new world. It's your boy Jay, followed by my co-hosts and brothers Mal, aka Bardo, and CJ, aka Buffy. And today, we're going to talk about the situation regarding Jaylen Brown and how the end to his Celtics tenure came in a rather disrespectful fashion. But before me and the fellas discuss this and more basketball topics, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications to stay tuned for more content, and if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and drop any comments. Now, as I said before, Jaylen Brown and the Celtics ended off in a rather ugly way to a lot of basketball fans. Brown was traded to the Philadelphia 76ers, yes, the team that beat them in the first round after completing a 3-1 comeback, for Paul George, 2 firsts, and 2 seconds. Although this was the trade they settled on, there were multiple different packages lined up. For instance, a 3-team trade with Houston and the Pistons that would bring Sengun to Boston, KD to Detroit, Jaylen Brown to Houston, and whatever Detroit would give up. Although this was one of the big trades, there was also talks with the Hornets that included Brandon Miller, more than 3 first-round picks in exchange for Jaylen Brown. The Hornets declined that trade. And lastly was the biggest talk about Boston trading, and that was Jaylen Brown for Giannis. As Giannis was ready to leave Milwaukee, he had a short list of teams that he was willing to re-sign with, one being the Celtics. And all reports pointed to the Celtics being frontrunners at getting Giannis. Those talks then cooled off as GM Brad Stevens was not willing to give up his young players in Baylor Shireman and Hugo Gonzalez. More reports came in that Stevens was also unwilling to give Giannis an extension past 3 years. Disrespectful parts come in as the Celtics felt the team was not a championship caliber team with JB and Jason Tatum continuing together. Boston was also not willing to pay Jaylen Brown for his next upcoming extension, as he would more than likely have another max extension on top of his nearly $60 million a year supermax deal. Boston also felt that Jaylen Brown wasn't the best player on the team this past season, as they felt analytically Derek White was the better player. And also, they felt analytically that Jaylen Brown was the 7th best player on the team. Boston also felt the comments Jaylen Brown had been making on his streams after the first round exit was a distraction. And lastly, people in the NBA believe that Jaylen Brown has a disease where he thinks he is the smartest person in the room. Now, fellas, it's a lot to take in. It's a lot to break down. What are you guys' thoughts on the way Boston got Jaylen Brown up out of there?
Yeah, I'm really glad that we're having this conversation because the Jaylen Brown smear campaign has honestly been one of the most disturbing things that I think that we've covered in the 2 years that we've been having this channel. And I say that because this conversation is very nuanced, very multifaceted regarding Jaylen Brown. And one of the things that really irritates me is either the media's unwillingness or incapability to actually objectively talk about this situation. And I think that that's why I am just very, very grateful for platforms like this where, just ordinary, regular people like us can just give our takeaway and our opinion on this conversation without having any ties or without being bought and paid for, because I can tell by the way that Jaylen Brown has been covered that people have allowed their allegiances to get in the way of their better judgment of what's actually being talked about. I had to sit on this one for a minute. Like it took me probably the last 2 to 3 weeks to really formalize a primary opinion on how I feel about the situation. And funny thing enough, I think it's kind of ironic. This situation really, for the most part, is about money, is a financial problem. And I have not, for the most part, maybe I'm wrong, but for the big wigs like ESPN, who Jaylen Brown came out maybe a week and a half ago and said was unethical, which they are, I have not heard them talk about the financial angle. Only thing that I've heard people like, Stephen A. Smith and Kendrick Perkins and Colin Cowherd and all of these people, only thing that I've heard them talk about is Jaylen Brown, as Jay said, he thinks he's the smartest person in the room. He thinks that he's arrogant. He doesn't get along with his teammates. Jason Tatum doesn't like him. I've heard about all of these things. And we've even got to the point of questioning how great of a basketball player he is due to advanced analytics, which I'm going to touch on that really quick right now. The problem with advanced analytics is that anybody that knows me and knows what I do for a living, I love stats, I love data, but they can tell you a story based on what message you're trying to put out there. And that's the same case with basketball. Advanced analytics, they tell you a part of it, a segment of it, but they don't give you the full picture. So when people are going off of a net rating and saying that due to a plus minus on off the court for Jaylen Brown, that makes him the 7th best player on the team, doesn't make any sense, because I did not know that people were utilizing plus minus as their end all be all for how they're going to determine how good of a basketball player somebody is. I think that's lunacy. I think it's lunacy that anybody that actually knows basketball could put a guy like Derek White, who had probably his worst shooting season ever, and say that he had a better, more impactful season than Jaylen Brown. I think that what you're trying to do is you either don't know basketball at all, or, which could be the case, but I think it's the latter, the second option, which is you guys have an agenda of what you're trying to push, and that is we need to validate why we basically traded Jaylen Brown for peanuts, essentially. Because no disrespect to Paul George, but he is 36. He just is not a great player anymore, and his value is not equivalent to that of a Jaylen Brown. Now, we understand, like I said, this is a financial matter. We understand that this is a salary dump. You're trying to get up off of Jaylen Brown because you don't want to give him the 2-year, $112 to $120 million extension. We know that that's really why. That's the reason why they don't want to pay Jaylen Brown. And we understand that, and we understand that that's why they obtained Paul George. But Boston Celtics organization, and this is why I said in the last video that we made, I can't stand these niggas. Stop fucking lying and stop acting like, it's anything deeper than what it is. Stop trying to make it seem. Stop with these anonymous sources. Stop putting out misinformation and disinformation. Actually, you're putting out disinformation to try to justify why you felt you had to make this move as if Jaylen Brown was a problem. Jaylen Brown is not a problem. The problem with the Boston Celtics is that, and this is really something that has never been covered, and why my brother Jay said he wanted to talk about this. I said, it's time to talk about it, because I had to really do some research and do some digging. The NBA, they had a very, 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 very successful season this year. Ratings were through the roof. Viewership was through the roof, especially in the postseason. But they do have a problem on their hands. I don't even know if they really want to resolve the problem. But people are under the estimation that NBA owners make money. They actually don't really make money. They don't really make any money, especially if they have a winning season. Because think about this. If you are having a winning season, that means that you probably have a lot, because this is not the NFL. Unless you're probably like the Spurs or some team where majority of your players are young players, you probably have a lot of big-time contracts. And if you have a lot of big-time contracts and you're winning, you're not going to be making any money. The margins, the profit margins, you're probably going to lose 10 to 20, tens of millions upon millions of dollars on annual if you're actually trying to win. I even saw something from Mark Cuban where Mark Cuban was like, out of the 20-something years that he owned or had a majority ownership in the Dallas Mavericks, he probably only made money two or three out of those 20-plus seasons, and those were seasons where they were bad. Most people in the NBA don't really want to perform well if they're only in it to make money. For the most part, if you're getting into the business of owning an NBA team, there are a few reasons as to why you're doing that. Either one, and this is what it used to be, you're a super fan and you just like owning and operating a franchise. Two, you want to get one of those big time franchises on the coast, like in an LA market or a Miami market or something like that, if you are trying to make money. Or three, and this is why most people are now getting into the NBA ownership business, you're trying to hold on as long as possible to get the valuation up so that you can sell eventually and make a profit of, get a payout of $5+ billion, which is what the Boston Celtics end up selling for. They sold for around $6 billion to the current ownership. The current ownership that's in place for the Boston Celtics is a guy named Bill Chisholm. Bill Chisholm is not that wealthy. If you just look at his net worth, which everybody likes to go off of, his net worth is only about $6 billion. He had to essentially get involved a private equity fund to help fund this deal. So the private equity fund that he is in cahoots with is I think they're called Sixth Street. And Sixth Street, I think they also have some ownership in another NBA team, if I'm not mistaken. I think it may be the Spurs. if I'm not mistaken, but they have ownership in another NBA team as well. So within that, the NBA has always been hesitant on allowing these private equity funds to get involved because of situations like this, where you have a private equity fund that has a 10% stake in the Boston Celtics. And due to that, the primary person to face, basically allegedly what the deal is that the private equity fund, they essentially get to touch the money. They essentially get a hold of the revenue before the business loses money. So even if the business loses money, even if the Boston Celtics don't make money, the Sixth Street, they will get their money first, which means what? The current majority owner, Bill Chisholm, he has to pay the net losses. He's responsible for all the net losses after the fact. So what ends up happening is we can't afford to pay Jaylen Brown because I'm going to be on the hook because I basically paid for a franchise that I really don't, I really can't afford. So since I can't afford it, we're going to be penny pinching just to make sure that we can cover our losses because we're going to be losing if we're in the market of winning championships. And essentially what the Boston Celtics realized was we cannot win a championship right now, even though Jaylen Brown is great because they know he's great. We cannot win a championship right now. So if we know that we're not going to win a championship, even though based on how Jaylen Brown performed, if you think Jason Tatum is as good as they think he is, they have an opportunity to win a championship if they just go within the margins and, fill in the roster. They don't think that they can do that as of now. So they said, what? We're going to move on from Jaylen Brown because Jason Tatum is our face. Jason Tatum's trade value also isn't that high. We're going to move on from Jaylen Brown and we're going to rebuild, basically. We're going to rebuild and we're going to really figure out which of these role players do we want to keep and how are we going to fill out and flesh out this roster because we're no longer going to be in the business where we're paying two guys $300+ million. We just cannot afford to do it because I'm going to be on the hook for that with the operating costs. And it's basically like this. When you buy a house that you can't afford, but you got this humongous loan, and you got to take that into account. You really can't afford to make any renovations to the home. You really can only afford to manage the current bills and utilities. If anything breaks down, you're probably going to have to downgrade or downsize because you really can't afford that home. That essentially is what has happened with the Boston Celtics, and they resulted to, because they can't handle the heat, they can't fucking handle the pressure. They resulted to basically smearing the reputation and the name of the 2024 NBA Finals MVP, the guy that basically won they bum asses a championship. And they can give me all of the stats that they want about how, when Jason Tatum is on the court, when he has a usage rate of 30+%, 80% of the time they win, they can give me all of that. But when they won a championship that they had to win, where all the pressure was on Brad Stevens and on the organization and on the front office and on the coaching staff, they had to win. Jaylen Brown was the Eastern Conference Finals MVP and he was the NBA Finals MVP. Because the problem that happened with the Boston Celtics this past season, the season of 2025-2026, was that they did not think that Jaylen Brown was great enough to get them to damn near 60 wins. That did not follow their timeline. Their timeline was to suck, to be terrible, awful, maybe not even make the postseason, and for them to come up off of all of their high contract assets except for Jason Tatum and to rebuild and restart. That was their goal. Jaylen Brown threw a monkey wrench in that because of how fucking great he is. And people need to stop being lazy in the media space and actually go out there and do their job and stop taking these anonymous weak ass quotes. Just because somebody gives you a weak ass anonymous quote and that it's gonna hit the tea leaves, it's gonna hit the timelines, that doesn't mean that you need to talk about it unless your integrity doesn't really matter. Only thing that matters is, let me get some clout, let me put my name on this so I can get some more, I can get some more engagement on my tweets. I can get some more engagements on my bum ass show. That's what's happened with the Jaylen Brown situation. It's disgusting. It's disturbing, but I'm really not surprised because these people just revealed their true colors. All they care about is money on all sides, from the Boston Celtics, from ESPN, from all of these media platforms. They only care about money, attention, engagement. That's the only thing that they care about. And they're willing to basically smear the reputation of this man who is a great basketball player and is an intellect and has no problem with telling people that he is an intellect. because he doesn't want to be a part of the machine, we resulted to damaging the reputation of Jaylen Brown. I will not stand for it. I will not tolerate it. And that's why I'm very, very glad and grateful that, the brothers wanted to talk about this, because I knew for a fact that this right here is not right. It's obscene. And most people are not going to provide this type of coverage. But this is the coverage that needed to be provided, ladies and gentlemen. So everybody stop being lazy and actually go out there and do some real research. As Jaylen Brown says, go out there and do some actual journalism instead of just believing all the bullshit that you see on the timelines. That's all I got to say, man. But, shout out to Jaylen Brown. I'm not a fan of any NBA player, but I did tell the brothers that I'm going to be rooting for Jaylen Brown. I am a part of the JBFC as of now, just because he's a great player. He is relatively intelligent. Intellect is relative, but I do think that he's smarter than most of these clowns that I see. And he's willing to actually talk about the nonsense and the foolishness that's going on within the media space. Because no disrespect to Jason Tatum, but basically the Boston Celtics just want a golem. They just want somebody that's going to be dormant, that they can control and manipulate. And Jaylen Brown cannot be controlled or manipulated. So that's really what it is. And people that don't want to acknowledge that are just being blind, or they're actually just that fucking stupid.
Yeah, man, I'm gonna go ahead and really just talk about the trade stuff. Like I said, it was a lot of disrespect that was going on. Really just kind of seeing the whole, I don't know what's the word, the aftermath of it all. Man, Brad Stevens, I said in our group chat that the man's got to go. I honestly thought the man was on.
Oh, he's not going anywhere. He's a part of the plan. Like anything that Brad Stevens has done, it has gotten the approval up top. So this is according to their plan. They're basically married to Brad Stevens. They actually think that he's the smartest person in the room, that he can do anything wrong. And like I said, everybody that's currently in place right now with this franchise that you see, Brad Stevens, ownership, Jason Tatum, Joe Mazzulla, they're all in agreement with this plan moving forward. So he's not going anywhere. Like that's why Jaylen Brown said it doesn't have anything really to do with Brad Stevens, because it's more so about the ownership. This is what the ownership wants. They have co-signed on this. They said, you're not giving Jaylen Brown an extension. We can't afford it. As I just explained to you guys, you're not giving him extension. Move him. We don't care what you got to do to move him. Move him. It's the same thing with the Ime Udoka situation. Brad Stevens is the perfect soldier. He's a good soldier for the Boston Celtics. That's why they're not going to move on from him. He will literally do any and everything that they say. Brad Stevens loved Ime Udoka. He loved him as a coach. He did not want to get rid of Ime, because what ownership wanted to do when they were going to get rid of Ime, they wanted Brad Stevens to come down and coach the team. He didn't want to do it. That's why they brought in Joe Mazzulla. So this is not a Brad Stevens call. I know that I was giving him a lot of harsh critique. It's really not about him. It's about ownership. Had nothing to do with Brad Stevens. He's a pawn on the fucking chessboard. He has nothing to do with any big decisions like this that are being made. Nothing.
Yeah, and I mean, it's pretty obvious that this has everything to do with money, but, it's just lame how it's unfolding, and, the media is basically putting a dark cloud around Jaylen Brown and trying to defame him. Honestly, I think it's lame. It's super lame, and I'm not really one to kind of really just talk about, the media and all that, but the way they were doing is, it's just lame. Now, speaking on the trade, for both teams, it's not like they're just big needle movers to where I think either one of them are going to make it to the finals just yet. Like with Philly, that's a nice big four, but you also have a big man who's probably going to at best give you 30 to 35 games in an NBA season consistently. And then if you look at their bench depth, outside of Phylon Jr., who they just drafted, Anthony Simons, like that's really all Philly got. I mean, they have no backup bigs unless, Andre Drummond is your backup big, and he just came out and stated like last week that he's tired of being a backup. He still feels like he's a starter, and he still plays at the level of his years that he was an all-star. He doesn't, but whatever. Hey, more power to you, brother. But yeah, I think that Philly roster is still incomplete. Boston roster, apparently those guys really believe in some of their guys analytically. They probably think they are the best roster in the East. Maybe, who knows? They probably analytically think that Baylor Shireman is going to be the next Boston great.
Wait, do you really think that they think
Hugo.
that they're the best roster in the East? I think that they understand that they're not, and that's why they
Well, I don't
moving
know.
off
I
of Jaylen
mean,
Brown.
they've been speaking pretty highly on Hugo Gonzalez and Baylor Shireman. If
But I
you're
think that
referring
this
to,
is this is a long term investment. I don't think that they're thinking, oh man, we got the pieces in place to really make a run at it. I think that they're thinking, let's figure out who we actually want to retain for the long term as we do this soft to hard rebuild. I don't think it has anything to do with them thinking, oh, we can go into next season and win it all. I don't think that that's the case at all.
nah, maybe not necessarily win it all, but
Well,
yeah, Boston.
you said they think that they may think that this is the best roster in the East. I don't think that they think that at all.
No,
I
I'm
think that
just
they
saying
think that.
analytically, like these guys, all these coaching staffs, analytically, they think they're much higher than what we're seeing with our eyes. So
I think
I don't know.
analytically they think that those guys are long term assets that they can retain, and because they have them on good, valuable contracts, we can keep them. This is a very, and I don't agree with this plan at all. As you guys can hear my voice, but I think that this is a lot deeper than, oh, we don't like Jaylen Brown, we're trying to get rid of Jaylen Brown. It's like, no, we're not good enough. We're not good enough. We're not good because they know Jaylen Brown is great, but they're saying we're not good enough. But who can we keep that also is cheap? Because we still got to have a team to build off of while we make our moves within these next 2 to 3 years, or 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 years. I think that was the decision making process. Honestly, I think that they're probably going to be the worst team that we've seen within this Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum era. And I think that they know that. So they're building for the long haul. I don't think this really has anything to do with them thinking we're going to be better without JB.
And I mean, yeah, it can definitely work out that way, long term, because with Philly, Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, sometimes they do get pretty hurt. Mainly Joel Embiid, he's very injury prone, so you can kind of also bank on maybe those guys being like a lower seeded team, to where those two first round picks, if they are Philly's own, maybe those can go higher. But also I've seen that apparently the Celtics are hoping that Peyton Pritchard has a Jalen Brunson type of leap. Uh, that's pretty funny to say, especially after the man just came off of winning a Finals MVP, and Jalen Brunson has been put in crazy talks since then. So it's pretty wild to ask that of Peyton Pritchard. But I think Peyton Pritchard possibly in Missoula's system could average maybe 20. I mean, that's not bad to say in the NBA now, but
20 on a
yeah,
bad team, not
yeah,
on a
on a
good
bad
team.
team, yeah, you definitely can.
And that's why I'm
It
saying they're
was
going to be
surprising.
bad because they're only saying that for really one reason. They want to get the value of Peyton Pritchard up so that they could potentially move him. That's the only way that you say some dumbass shit like that. Nobody in their mama really believes that Peyton Pritchard can have a Jalen Brown type leap, like Jalen Brunson type leap. Like, what the fuck are y'all talking about? That's what I'm saying.
Maybe.
This whole anonymous source shit is just manipulation. Like, we're trying to manipulate the value of these products. It's dumb. Nobody actually believes any of this shit.
Yeah, it's probably why they said that stuff about Derek White being the best player on the Celtics. Maybe they're hoping that he
Yeah.
can, go stupid next year. Even though I know what I saw in this postseason. When he shoots bad, he shoots bad. Now he might be probably the best shot blocking guard in the league, but that shooting, with Joe Mazzulla, Joe Mazzulla, of course, he seems like he's a stubborn guy, and their whole live or die by the three at some point is it's gotta change, and they've gotta find a happy medium or a balance to it. But now, yeah, they've shot themselves out of so many games in the past with JB and JT, and we've seen how that leads to blown leads. We saw them blow the 3-1 lead in this past postseason. They also sold leads last year in the postseason against the Knicks, and it's just happened plenty of times. But yeah, man, Jaylen Brown stuff is pretty lame, especially this whole anonymous stuff. Like like Jaylen Brown said before with Stephen A. Smith when he was talking about him and they had that little sit down, he was like, state your sources. Like, come on, bro. Don't stop acting like childish and lame, like talking through the grapevine, all this stuff. Like, if you talking about this man saying basically you think being smart is a disease is pretty lame, and then you're just basically like, I think Jaylen Brown was saying it on his stream, like this is his life too. Like you're basically defaming this dude's name, making it seem like he's, I don't know, an asshole, and he just thinks he's better than everybody. And it's pretty lame. Like even when Jaylen Brown was coming into the league, a lot of people were saying that he was too smart to be an NBA player. And I mean, it's just lame. And it can also kind of affect like the younger generation because these guys are these young boys that are, trying to make it to the league. They could be like, oh man, yeah, I'm really smart in school, but I'm getting looked down upon for trying to be smart and be smart, get great education, all that good stuff. And then I also want to play ball and stuff like that, but that's looked down upon. And that could, negatively affect the younger generation too. So you also got to think about that stuff. I think it's lame when Stephen A. Smith is, constantly chirping at Jaylen Brown about this stuff. Especially, this is the guy who always says that stuff like this doesn't bother him when someone, says something to him. Like, that stuff is lame. But yeah, man, the media, they got what they want, I guess. They finally got Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum to break up. So I hope they're happy. It's pretty lame when you see stuff like this, where you see, dynamic duos, big threes, all that stuff, where you kind of don't feel like you see that they just work out well off rip and you just automatically want them to break up. But the stuff is lame, man. We're going to be on the FC for Jaylen Brown, of course. Brother got the same name as me, so I'm going to be rooting for him, especially after all this stuff that's been going on. Hopefully we can see that Philly Big Four make some noise. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Buffy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to say about Jaylen Brown's situation that hasn't already been said. I do think it's interesting how the Boston Celtics try to move over that situation. I do think Jaylen Brown's run on the Boston Celtics was definitely coming to an end, especially during the course of the playoffs last year. Seeing how bad their offense sputtered in those last couple games, was really, really, it was really, really hard to watch, especially them blowing a 3-1 lead to a 7 seed that instantly got smacked in the second round, like in a sweep. So I do think it was definitely time to move on. They've been breaking up Jaylen Brown's name in trade talks since I remember Kevin Durant was on the Brooklyn Nets. So it's been something that's been going around every all season. Fortunately, they were able to capitalize on the championship in 2024, but they were really, really loaded when you look at their roster, and their payroll was insane. They weren't going to be able to keep those guys, and then going into 2025, all those guys from the role players, from Drew Holiday to Porzingis and his quote unquote illness, they were just like, they basically fell off the map. So I do think now it's perfect time to break things up. Jaylen Brown's value isn't really even high, really. I mean, really when those reports came out, it kind of diminished his value. And in my opinion, I don't think Jaylen Brown's a high impact player. But when you look at teams, especially like the Boston Celtics, and many people don't realize this, when you look at the plus minus of teams like that, the Boston Celtics on average are going to have a better bench than most teams. So that's why the plus minus kind of looks like that. It's not that Jaylen Brown is like doing nothing on the offensive side of the ball. It's the fact that, usually when he goes to the bench, like their bench can keep up. It's the same thing that happened with Oklahoma City Thunder in the playoffs last year. Their bench was playing better when SGA was off the court because they have a better bench than most people, and they have more depth. So, yeah, I mean, I'm proud for Jaylen Brown. Definitely starting around with a new team. In my opinion, this is gonna be a better life for him. I'm kind of hesitant to call it a big four because I think VJ Edgecombe, he's got to give me like a year or two, bro. Yeah, I think it's a good fit for him. It's going to be interesting to see how he interacts with Joel and B. Those guys have a lot of history together. And I'm glad the Boston Celtics kind of moved on. We're now in this era where we've realized that they're not the best team anymore. Like, going to the playoffs, like, every year it's like, hey, the Boston Celtics coming out the East. And I'm like, I don't think they will, man. Like, I feel like people just say that because they're consistently a top 3 team and they won a championship 2 years ago. But, just looking at the team roster, I'm like, I don't know, man. And, with the way their 3-point variance is, um, you know, there's games where, they make 25 threes a game, and there's games where they shoot 16% from three. So, it is very, very hard to evaluate in the postseason, and that's why I do think they blow a lot of leads, because they just fall in love with the three too much. It's almost like the Houston Rockets in 2018. So, definitely glad this era is coming to a close. I'm glad that they were able to capitalize on the championship. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Definitely evident those guys aren't best friends. They just they just work together. like I was looking at Jaylen Brown's, no, Jason Tatum's Instagram post, and he was like, he showed more emotion when Rob Williams left the team, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, as far, I do think the great thing is, while the media was trying to break them up during the time they were together in 2023, 2022, 2024, those guys, they said on record, on, verbatim on, media outlets, they were like, hey man, can't break us up, man. Like, we're too talented, bro. And I do think it was really, really great that they were able to capitalize on that championship, as they did, even though Dallas Mavericks, weren't one of the best teams to come out the Western Conference of this decade, but hey man, championship is a championship, and they basically steamrolled through the whole playoffs. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I got. I do think Jaylen Brown, this is going to be a better environment for him, and that's funny saying that because this is Philadelphia. So, but I feel like the area around Boston was definitely toxic and very, very insidious towards Jaylen Brown. I don't know why they treat him like that. And it's funny because the Boston Celtics fans, they would treat Jaylen Brown kind of like shit, and then when they finally traded him, it was like, oh, we traded him for nothing, man. Like, come back to the team. It's like, dude, y'all guys don't like this dude. I mean, like how many times have I seen Boston Celtics fans say Jaylen Brown can't play in the half court? He like he's not a good number one option. Like, I've heard that from Boston Celtics fans. So, yeah, congratulations to the brother, man, and hopefully he can succeed on his new roster, his new team.
To wrap up the video, piggybacking off of your last comments, I always have despised the term fandom, because we all know that a fan is just an abbreviation for fanatic. But when it comes to fans, the Boston Celtics have to be one of the worst fan bases in sports. They are disgusting people. They have very shitty qualities, no pun intended. Look at what they did to their greatest winner of all time, Bill Russell, defecated in the man's bed after he won that bum-ass city 11 championships. So the treatment of Jaylen Brown goes back to what, kind of what Jay was saying about how I think that this whole situation, Jaylen Brown gives me a lot of Kyrie Irving with his aura, his essence, and a lot of it, in my opinion, has been utilized as a means of propaganda, going back to what Jay was saying, for our young so-called black males to basically dissuade and disvalue intellect. For one, I'm going to be honest, most athletes are not intellects. Most of them do fit in that dumb jock category. That is true. If you are going to be an athlete, if you do have that level of talent, you probably, I'll say this, if you are athletic and you also want to be an intellect, do not play a team sport. For the most part, your mental makeup is not going to blend well, especially if you're introverted as well. It's not going to blend well in a team setting because the culture is so brouhaha and very brutish. It's not going to vibe well for you. Most of those guys need to play like golf or tennis or something like that. If I'm just giving any type of advice, because I do know that a lot of people that do fit that mold and do fit that quote unquote stereotype of being an intelligent athlete, they're going to see the treatment of Jaylen Brown, and it's going to kind of, give them cause to pause and make them a little underconfident. I would just tell anybody that is aspiring to be in athletics that you probably just need to play an individual sport, or play a sport where the culture is not as reverse as, this shit, because it's not going to work. But this definitely was some level of propaganda to really have impact and influence young minds into thinking that, oh, I can't be intelligent and also be an athlete, or being intelligent and being a so-called black man is looked down upon. So I need to hide it if I do have it, or I need to act as if I'm, like I said, a golem, or be dormant and need to conform to the culture and to Western civilization. So do I think it, like a lot of people are saying that this is because Jaylen Brown is woke? I said that I thought it was a lot deeper than that. I think it's more so this is how they feel about our demographic as a whole. And I was going to save that for a later date, but with you guys bringing up some of those points, I thought it was very relevant for this topic in this conversation. So that's something for people to keep in mind that do fit in our demographic. Just understand that what's going on is not it's a form of reality, but it's not at the same time. Perception is not always reality. What's going on doesn't mean that you need to do it differently. It doesn't mean that, because people like Jaylen Brown have been treated like, because I have to explain something to some people at this. At the end of the day, we're saying how we feel about the Jaylen Brown situation, but Jaylen Brown is gonna make hundreds of pounds, maybe even billions of dollars within his lifetime. So feeling sorry or feeling bad for Jaylen Brown in the large scale of things is not really needed. We're just talking about this from a basketball standpoint. But in a reality standpoint, you just have to understand that the demonization of our demographic, especially when you do have that level of intellect, is a real thing, but it's not anything to be afraid of. It's just something to acknowledge and to take into consideration when you're moving on the day to day. Because this game of life, it's a game of chess. So if you're thinking that you're just going to be able to say whatever you want to say, and there are going to be no repercussions for your actions because you're smart, is not going to work. We do not have that luxury of having that approach. We have to be smart. And I think that that's the only thing I can say about what Jaylen Brown did is his tact was not always the best in certain instances. Certain instances, I'm not saying he should have been quiet, but he should have utilized a certain level of decorum before making certain statements. If he really was, if he really didn't want to be quote unquote demonized. Like calling ESPN unethical, do I agree? Yes. But do I think it should have been stated? Probably not. Saying that Nike, also going at Nike and going at these other factions, I do not think that those are smart moves to do. Saying F. Stephen A. Smith, if you're an intellect, I feel like there are better word choices than that. Even though, like I said, I do agree with it. They're just a better way to go about it. And I don't want people to think that Jaylen Brown was faultless, because he was not. As human beings, as men, we have to take accountability for our actions and for our missteps. And he did make a few missteps that somebody that is an intellect should not have made, having that type of voice and that type of platform. So I just wanted to say that before we wrapped up and ended off the video, for people to be mindful of those things. But, once again, all in all, though, shout out to Jaylen Brown. He will have the support of this channel, and we will be supporting him and his endeavors. Like I said, I don't care about Philadelphia as a city, but I do like, Tyrese Maxey and VJ Edgecombe, and I really hope this team can do some good things. I agree. I don't really know how the Joel Embiid impact is going to work because I don't really know how he's going to play and how he really fits, but it should be some good entertainment, and we may have to do some type of live stream when they go to Boston, because that is going to be must-see TV of Jaylen Brown going to Boston for the first time. I know for a fact that they're probably going to boo him, even though, like I said, he won the bum ass another championship, and that city did not deserve another championship. Probably don't deserve all the championships that they currently have, and he won that bum ass city a championship. So that's all I gotta say, man. We can end off the video.
Stay